Kathy J. Oh, hello. Welcome to the Kathy J Show. I'm Katie Mitchell. I am so excited to be with you here today. Kathy's best friend and radio DJ from Cool 105. Actually, right after this show, I race over to the radio station to hang out with you there as well. So I hope I can be a part of your day a little later on too. She's at the doctor's office actually getting an update on her leg, and she wants everyone to know. She says thank you for all the love on social media, and she's doing great. We're going to get a good update, and things are moving forward. So we're really excited about that. But being as I've, worked a lot this week, I work a lot today, I've gotten hardly any sleep, and I know a lot of people deal with not getting any sleep, and it's one of the most important things in living a healthy life, right? I mean, think of how we function when we don't get it. But what happens when our sleep gets disrupted by sleep disorders like night terrors, and what about sleepwalking? Yeah, it's another sleep disorder, but this one even more common. There are more than 3 million cases per year in the U.S. alone, and today we have clinical health psychologist Dr. Lauren Gorog here to help us understand them, and both really help us clear up a lot of misconceptions too. So welcome, Dr. Lauren. I'm so excited you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
To meet
it's really
you.
Nice to meet you.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk a lot about sleep. I've gotten a lot of questions about this topic, just telling people I'd be here and talking to you about it. But when it comes to night terrors now, what are they and what are they not? Because people confuse them, right, as being like bad nightmares, but what's the difference? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So night terrors are considered parasomnias, and they happen during the non-REM part of sleep. They're typically disorders of arousal, and so they happen during a point in sleep where you're not dreaming. So they're really not a nightmare. There's not a point in which there's a whole story going on where you're able to recall it. So the biggest distinction is that your nervous system's aroused, so you might be crying or in complete panic mode, but really difficult to waken somebody with a night terror, and they will not recall it.
Yeah, that's the big thing,
they will not
is
recall
the
it.
memory. You don't have a memory of it, and that is scary in itself. But how do you know that you're having a night terror? Is that it, that you don't remember it?
You don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, but so what triggers them, and then how long do they last usually?
So it's interesting. So what could trigger it is not the same thing that would make somebody vulnerable to it. So typically there is a genetic link, about 35 to 40% accounted for genetically. So probably somebody in your family might have had a night terror or sleptwalk, and it makes you more vulnerable, but what would trigger it might be stress, sleep deprivation, or even being a child. There's a natural developmental period to developing a sleep structure that could account for some of that we see.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, and when we come back, we are going to talk about how we stop night terrors and really dive into a little bit more about this, the underlying causes and symptoms and whatnot, because it's a fascinating subject.
It really is.
Sleep is just, we could talk about it all day, but then we'd get no sleep, right?
Exactly.
All right, we'll talk about it more when we come back to the Kathy J Show. Kathy J.
The Colorado Lottery is an official partner of the Kathy J Show. Colorado Lottery, play on.
Welcome back to the Kathy J Show, everybody. I'm Katie Mitchell of Cool 105, Kathy J's bestie, filling in for her again today. She's continuing to recover from that broken leg, and good vibes her way. She's doing really well, so we'll get another update about that a little later on. But today, we've been talking about night terrors. We're trying to understand them better so we can help our loved ones and ourselves. And if you're battling them right now or ever really faced with them in your life, they can be scary, right? So Dr. Lauren is here to talk to us. And again, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate the discussion. But how do night terrors differ in children versus adults?
That's a great question. So how they manifest might look no different, but the underlying cause might be different, and that is really important.
Okay.
If this is something that you've experienced since childhood, chances are it's benign. It's a part of development, and there's nothing really to be too concerned about. when it happens in adulthood, it could be a sign of neurodegenerative disease. Not to scare anyone out there, but it is important if this is something that you learned about, right? A loved one or a bed partner tells you this is new and they've never seen it, then it is important to look into it further.
Okay, so with kids, it is a little bit more just of a developmental stage. There's not really a whole lot you should worry about. So your kid wakes up and is like, I fought a war in a past life. Like, you shouldn't rush him to the doctor to figure out what's wrong there. It's just something that's going on that kids deal with. But definitely look into it if you're seeing a pattern of it as an adult.
Yeah, more of a
Okay.
pattern, a frequency. If it's happening later into the morning hours, it might not be a parasomnia, it might not be a sleep terror, it could be some other type of sleep disorder that would be more caused by an organic medical concern. But yeah, it's really tricky.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to kids, well, in adults, it really scares the other person more so.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Colleen, our producer, she had one as a toddler, and the first one happened when she and her family, they were actually visiting her grandmother in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And it really, like, she doesn't remember any of it. So, you know, the fact that it is so prevalent, a lot of people deal with night terrors in children. Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right. And it will scare family members because oftentimes there's such panic and distress in the child, and sometimes they're getting out of bed and yelling and screaming and just eyes open, and you're looking at them trying to get them to see you, but there's a blank stare and as if
Absolutely.
they're not there but they are, and it's confusing.
Yeah. My child, I mean, it's funny because we talked about how she woke up a few times when she was younger and would wake up and say something funny, and I would just be like, that's weird, let's get you back to bed, you know, but there could be something to that where it was something like a night terror or even sleepwalking, which we'll get to in a little bit, but there could be some correlation between that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And oftentimes with parasomnias, like a night terror or sleepwalking, they could happen at the same time, one before the other. So really they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
But again, I think the important piece is not to be alarmed, but in fact to gently guide them back to bed or comfort them or soothe them. Because oftentimes if you're waking them up in distress, that would cause more stress for them.
Well, and can you get other treatment besides just trying to be there and gently guide them when it happens?
Oftentimes it's not really necessary.
Yeah.
But if it was something that you were concerned about, then absolutely. Oftentimes if you go to maybe a primary care physician or a pediatrician, whether they refer to a sleep psychologist or not, it starts off with getting a good diary, a sleep diary, so that they can see when it's happening, how frequent, how long it's happening, and what kind of behaviors the child or adolescent's demonstrating.
Yeah.
And then from there might be a sleep study or CBT, which is what I do. So something more psychological if there is stress or anxiety.
Okay, that's great advice. Definitely the diary part as well. And you know, sleepwalking, again, a totally different thing. So we're going to dive into that one next because I've got lots of questions. Woke up doing things I don't understand, Dr. Lauren. So we're going to get into sleepwalking next on the Kathy J Show.
Kathy J.
Ramos Law is an official partner of the Kathy J Show. He's a medical doctor and a lawyer. Ramos Law, what makes us different makes us better.
Kathy J.
Hey, welcome back to the Kathy J Show, everybody. I'm Katie Mitchell, Kathy's best friend and fellow radio gal pal, filling in for her while she's healing from her leg surgery. And again, right after this, I head on over to Cool 105. We were just talking. We're giving away $500 a day, so I really hope you join us over there. That's cool, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely cool. I was like, I should probably call after this and see if I can get some.
See what we did there?
Yeah.
Cool. But we are talking about sleep disorders today that can potentially be harmful to ourselves and to others. The one that I have some experience with is sleepwalking. So my daughter, I told you earlier, she experienced little stages of that in her life, and I never really attributed it to sleepwalking until we were all talking about this show, and I was like, I've never really dealt with that. And Zoe's like, really? You don't remember? When I was like, okay, I guess that did happen, you know? So, but I just didn't associate it with sleepwalking because I don't know, I just didn't, but a lot of people do it. It's something that happens to a lot of us. Dr. Lauren is here to talk to us about sleep disorders and what causes sleepwalking. What is it?
Yeah, similar to night terrors, typically there's a disconnect between the cortical activity of your brain and the motor activity of your brain. And so you're not alert or oriented, not aware. Your eyes might be open, and yet your body is moving.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, it just sounds, so terrifying. And especially when you think about it happening to kids and, as far as just not being able to help them. A question I have, because we've all been told it, are you supposed to wake a sleepwalker? Are you supposed to just let them kind of roam the house and just be a guide so they don't break anything? Like, what do you do in that situation when you're the person witnessing it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, no hard and fast rule except for if you are worried about them in danger, right, that the sleepwalker leaves the house or there are stairs, then what you're supposed to do is protect them.
Okay.
Outside of
Number
that,
one,
yeah,
protect
them. And I think that the other kind of general rule is to guide them back safely, not to alarm or disturb. No real reason to waken them. But otherwise, just kind of monitor. It doesn't last very long, typically.
That is the good part, right?
That is the good part, is they probably won't get too far because it doesn't last too long. Again, to wake them up, it really is difficult to do that to begin with.
Yeah.
It is really difficult. And if they just go right back to sleep, regardless, they won't remember it.
Yeah. Which is, again, not remembering it. But what we were talking about, the extremes of sleepwalking, and there are people who will get in a car and drive as they're sleepwalking. Now, do I still have to keep them safe? Am I getting in this car, Dr. Lauren?
Just don't get on the road at the same time.
We're going for a ride.
Yeah, no, it's there are some really interesting stories that perplex specialists.
Yeah.
That on some level, it's mysterious to understand how we could operate a vehicle or even walk downstairs or do something and be okay.
Yeah.
In some cases, right, there will be accidents and there's danger involved, but in some cases it's just you're walking about. In fact, some people talk about that this actually challenges the notion of two types of states, awake and sleep, versus just different levels of consciousness. Because if you've ever gone home from a day of work and you don't remember how you got there, or like you weren't even there, it's kind of that sort of idea. Cognitively is that you're just not aware.
Yeah.
And this is kind of maybe what's happening here.
Yeah, well, and you also have experience with sleepwalking, right?
Yes.
You have a personal story, so we'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, definitely. I actually just called my mom not that long ago. I was like, hey, I'm going to be on the Kathy J show. I remember you telling me I sleptwalk. I don't remember it, obviously, but give me some information. What did I do and how was it? And she said that there was only a few accounts of me getting out of bed and kind of wandering into the living room and just looking around, and she just guided me right back to bed. And that was kind of it. She did. She kept me safe.
She did the number one.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good. Well, and how do, like, when you know you're a sleepwalker but you have no memory of it, what do you do?
Yeah. There's not much to do.
Yeah. Keep the journal. Remember, that's what we need you to
I
do.
think
but
if this is about you trying to keep track of it, I think it would be necessary to have somebody else there to do that.
So what about putting certain safety measures in place so that, if you know you're a sleepwalker, you have a habit of doing certain things, is there something you can do to make sure you're safe?
Yeah, absolutely. So padding the sides of the bed, because the corners of the nightstand can be really sharp. Keeping the door locked, and any sharp objects that would be near you to be out of the room. And I've heard of people putting a mattress on the ground, or if it's a high bed, sleeping on the ground. But that's in more extreme cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so we talked about how night terrors, like genetics can be involved, and there are other things as well. Is this the case with sleepwalking too, where stresses can make it happen, or genetics can, play a part in it? Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Substances can make one more vulnerable. So now we're not talking about children, we're talking more about adults. So substance use, alcohol, sleep deprivation, and poor sleep hygiene, so maybe dozing off to TV. If you're more vulnerable to night terrors or sleepwalking, that might induce some of that. But yeah, those are pretty much the main ones.
The main ones.
Yeah.
And I think about sleepwalking, but also when people wake up. Like a lot of people don't even recall that, like the first couple seconds, kids especially. Like I know Kathy's daughter Avery, we talk about this, when we wake her up, she's ready to fight, but she doesn't really remember it, Is that something that has to do with it as well? Like just like those couple seconds when someone first wakes up?
Well, that's interesting you say that. Another parasomnia is confusion arousal.
Yeah.
So you're waking up really confused and disoriented, and you might thrash a bit.
Yeah.
But there are accounts that some violent behavior can occur more in night terrors than in sleepwalking.
Yeah.
But definitely things to be aware of.
Wow, this is all just so fascinating. My God, don't go away. When we come back, the health concerns night terrors and sleepwalking can have on your overall well-being. We want to get down to that. So if you don't deal with them now, they could become an issue. And we'll talk about it next on The Kathy J Show.
Kathy J.
Oakwood Homes is an official partner of the Kathy J Show. Oakwood Homes, building happiness.
Kathy J.
Welcome back, everybody. I cannot believe we're already in the last part of the show. So many things to talk about today. We've actually been talking about some pretty common sleep disorders that many Americans are living with right now, and they're night terrors and sleepwalking. Both of these sleep disorders are very different, but the thing they have in common is they can be triggered by sleep deprivation. I know a lot of us are dealing with that right now, whether it's because of work or the crazy schedules everybody's living. I mean, getting a good night's sleep every night, it is so important, not only to help avoid these disorders really, but to help us be healthy. And Dr. Lauren is here to discuss this topic with us, and talk about that, Dr. Lauren, how important sleep is all around, but especially when dealing with these specific things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gosh, sleep is the most important thing we will do. And
Amen.
Yeah. And in regards to really kind of preventing these types of behaviors, having good sleep hygiene is really important. So at least 8 hours of sleep, and really trying to turn off the screens about an hour to 2 hours before bed, and kind of creating the environment so that you will naturally fall into a state of sleep is really beneficial. And really monitoring substance use and other things that can really induce these types of behaviors if you're, again, vulnerable to them.
Yeah, well, and we talk about those things being a good guide to get a good night's sleep in general, but especially when you're dealing with these sleepwalking disorders and night terrors. And, I really liked how we were talking about as a child when you're dealing with this, a lot of it can be just a developmental stage. It can be something that kids go through and they grow out of. But you had mentioned something about a sleep diary and keeping one if your child is, dealing with this kind of stuff. That's just a great way for somebody to get an idea if it is a pattern, if it is something you need to address further, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, right. Because with a parasomnia like a sleep terror or sleepwalking, it typically occurs at the beginning of the evening, so in the first 90 minutes of sleep, whereas if this is something else, which might have other underlying medical issues related to it, it would happen maybe later on in the evening. So getting an idea of when it's occurring, how often it's occurring, if it's even, and the consequences of what happened. So kind of tracking your child's behavior throughout the day too. Typically, if it's more of a nightmare disorder, which is a REM disorder, there is going to be daytime sleepiness and then a fear of going to bed. If these are sleep terrors or night sleepwalking, there's no awareness that this is happening, so going to bed the next night is not a fearful thing. And so I think tracking it, not only going to sleep, what's happening during sleep, but also the next day is really important to kind of parse it out. And it's good information for your physician.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I do like how you know, you said that when it comes to adults also it could just happen, but there is some things that you can do, keep yourself safe. Like this whole discussion has just been fascinating and very informative, but I know your website has a lot of stuff that you connect with people with, and you know, maybe gives us a better idea of what you can do if you're dealing with this kind of stuff. So tell us all about your website as well.
Yeah, you can go to www.goroghealth.com, and I have a couple blogs up right now, but at the bottom there's a connect to me portion, and you know, I'm totally happy if anyone wants to email me with questions or concerns, and I can get them connected with the right resources.
That's wonderful. I mean, thank you so much again for joining us
my
today.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was a great discussion.
Definitely.
And you can always, again, go to Dr. Lauren's website to find out more. And Kathy will be back next week. She's excited to hang out with you, and I am so grateful for you letting me hang out with you. I'm Katie Mitchell, and thank you so much for watching The Kathy J Show today. Have a great day. Bye.